So I'm going to start by telling you a story. Went for a run this morning. It was mostly dark, and I was a little concerned about the cars, especially going up Pearly Chase Lane.
Yeah.
And the very first curve I went around, car came whizzing around the corner on the wrong side of the road, almost plowed me, and I didn't say any bad words, even to myself. And I was pretty proud of myself. And then I spent the next little bit thinking about, well, you know, it was dark, and they probably pretty reliably were saying everybody has their headlights on. So, you know, they were on the wrong side of the road because they could see. It was safe. They weren't being unsafe. And the next person was perfect, but I didn't. You know, we were on a steep curve. I was way over, and my reaction was a little bit less charitable. You know, I said that person wasn't an idiot like the first person. So there was a degradation in my internal response to the person. Yes?
I wonder what the first driver was thinking about you.
He was rounding the corner and almost killing an innocent pedestrian. I hope that he was feeling very, very guilty.
Was this innocent pedestrian on the correct side of the road?
Well,
I think you said, "Damn, I almost did it again."
The thing is, I thought it was actually quite funny that Joran was saying that, because I didn't, even to myself, say a bad word. I was actually quite proud, because I don't generally swear in public, but I do sometimes when other people aren't hearing.
There's always somebody hearing.
Oh, no. Okay, yes. Then I got to the turnaround and realized that I was on the wrong side of the road. Because we've spent 10 days in France, and I was running or walking every single day on the road, and I had just automatically gotten onto the wrong side. And even though I've gone running 3 times since I've come back, I've been on trails, you know, and on paths. Yeah. And so I haven't had to face that oncoming traffic. So that person probably did say bad words about me, because I was solidly in their lane. I wasn't even on the side. Okay?
Wow. So it was all your fault.
It was all 100% my fault. Okay? So here I was, struggling not to say bad things about other people, and it was all my fault. And the reason I tell you that story is that we're going to be talking about serving others, being useful, and some of these ideas are going to be very familiar, and I just want to invite you to think about places where you might be on the wrong side of the road, just to recalibrate, you know, because we could always look at the way that we are serving other people and say, how can I do that better? And in heaven, the angels are going to be spending forever waking up each day saying, how can I do this better? And that's what makes life good. Okay, so we're going to be talking about 4 main ways that we serve. You know, here's the quote that Grant read last night. The sole purpose for which a person is born is that he may perform a use to the community he's in and to his neighbor while he lives in the world, and the next life may perform a use in accord with the Lord's gracious purposes. And I love that phrase, the sole purpose, the only reason we are here. Not just the primary reason. The only reason is to make a difference in the lives of other people. And I also just like that last phrase. We're going to serve a use according to the Lord's gracious purposes.
I love that phrase.
The Lord's got something really, really cool in mind for you for the next life. Sometimes this world can feel like a bit of a slog, but it's going to be really fun.
Yes,
yeah.
It's all perfect.
It's going to be better. It's going to be better. So, another familiar passage to some of you. Heavenly joy is the pleasure of doing something that is useful to oneself and to others. The pleasure of being useful takes its essence from love and its expression from wisdom. The pleasure in being useful, springing from love through wisdom, is the life and soul of heavenly joys. So, being useful is heaven with us. And that idea is repeated. Making a difference in people's lives is heaven. It's not just something that you do in heaven, it is heaven. So when you can make a difference now, you're in heaven. You're just experiencing it.
Eric, what that bit of use to oneself and to others?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
It's very strange.
Isn't that interesting? So, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. There are ways in which we can sometimes neglect ourselves in ways that aren't useful. So, I'm sure that you have at times gotten to the end of the day and gotten just to be able to relax and do something that's fun. And it can feel like, okay, I'm so glad I've done all those other things. Now I can actually stop. Oops. Whoa, wow.
Everything's going wrong.
This is the problem with being a more physical presenter. Sometimes I make a mess.
Paper?
Pardon?
Do you have a spill there?
I do, but it didn't come on my computer, so we're just going to ignore it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm moving closer to you. Are you nervous yet?
You haven't seen him.
I have sometimes felt guilty that I'm taking such delight in being able to stop working and relax and not realizing, oh, wait a minute, there's a use to myself and I can enjoy that. I can thoroughly relax and just let myself enjoy self-care also. Any of you grow up with the idea that taking care of yourself, enjoying yourself is somehow a little bit bad?
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Actually, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So here's a passage where the Lord's saying, no, that's okay. It's part of the plan. Okay? Here's one that I just love. People are not of sound mind unless usefulness guides their affections and their occupations. I don't know where that came from. Okay? So we are not of sound mind if usefulness isn't guiding our thinking. We're crazy, spiritually speaking. So usefulness is pretty important, isn't it? I think we know that. Okay. So we're going to be talking about 4 different kinds of usefulness today that the Lord speaks about. Your day job, good deeds, duties, and recreation. So let me just ask now as we begin, which would you say needs the most work in your life?
I think you'd have to define it.
Yeah, okay. So, I'm not expecting answers. I'm just asking that question in case anybody has ooh, I know. You know, maybe of those of you who grew up with taking care of yourself is bad, recreation is going to just sort of like, oh, I'm not very good at that. Okay, so we're going to go through these. And the first one is your day job, your occupation. Some of you are retired. And I want to ask you, just to start, what's your day job?
Does that mean the thing you spend the most hours doing? That's why I want a clarification.
Yeah.
To you.
Yeah. Well, I think it becomes a little bit more variable when you're retired. What's your day job? I think it often bifurcates because retired people are often doing 5 different things instead of one single thing that is their job, their obligation. So it changes.
You put the previous slide up. So my day job is good deeds, my duties, and recreation.
Okay. You also have some committees that you're part of that.
Yes.
Oh, that's my night job.
Yeah, and?
I was just thinking from the perspective of someone that was a full-time mama, but I also at the same time was sometimes doing other things that they're all happening. I mean, what am I trying to say? If I'm a mother, I'm constantly and always a mother. It's always in the background. I will never not be that. Is that my job? I sort of think it is, but it certainly has changed its characteristics and its aspects as my children have gotten older. But if I am painting, is that my... I sort of think they're both my job and they're all happening at the same time, sort of overlapping.
Right.
So it's not quite as clear cut, like I do this from 9 to 5 and then I do this.
Right. Yeah. Life. How many of you have worked 2 jobs in your lifetime? Okay.
I mean,
A couple
I would say
people have done.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So, right. So you can have multiple jobs, and I'm going to use the singular, and you're going to need to flex. And I'm going to specifically come back to the mom thing
Thank you.
a little bit later, because I think that's a significant thing. So charity itself is dealing fairly and faithfully in whatever position, business, or work one is engaged, and with those with whom one comes into contact. So charity, and we're here to become kind, charitable, loving people, is doing your job. It's really interesting how, and this is repeated repeatedly. Glorifying God means to bring forth the fruits of love, that is, to perform the work of one's occupation, and that's an accurate translation, occupation, faithfully, honestly, and diligently. For this is the effect of the love of God and love of the neighbor, and is what binds society together and makes its goodness. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah, this is pretty strong. So, we think about, when I say, what charitable deeds have you performed? Probably what would spring to mind is, well, I actually helped this poor person, or I contribute here. We think of extraneous things to our daily work. And the Lord says, actually, charity, the core, the guts, the essence of being a charitable person is what you're doing in that 9 to 5 period, with some of those qualifications that Anne's trying to work in. And this is the opposite of the way a lot of people think. A lot of people think of their job as a necessary evil, and then they get to go and do the real stuff that's important. And the Lord's actually saying, no, go back and think about what you do with the bulk of your waking hours. That is the place to say, how can I make a difference?
Okay, next question.
I'm going to give you on the floor first, and then you, yeah.
Yeah, on the surface it might look like that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I have to go to work. But really, I think if you would look into that person saying that, or many of them, they would say, yeah, my work is very important. Just going to your job, having a place to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I see people on the street. I know they're unemployed. You can see that. 11 o'clock in the morning, they're walking down the road and just not being very much alive. And so unemployment is a really bad thing.
Yeah.
Because you don't have this regularity in your life and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
social connections and so on. So I think, I see your point, but
Mm-hmm.
I think...
I think so. They have had a job and then they don't have one. They realise how important it was. And they
Yeah,
realise
that's a
they
good way
can't
to put it.
trust.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah. Right, I know. I have a son-in-law who is looking for a job right now. Job ended, he's still got lovely severance pay, so it's not like it's, eating is an issue, but you can see he's just sort of floating a little bit because he doesn't have that anchor.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Anne.
Well, you might be coming to this later, but I'll just use myself as an example. So if I'm painting all day in the studio, I'm self-employed. I might not really see another person all day. I might see you at meals. It's just interesting to me to think about doing that job honestly, faithfully, honestly, diligently. And I guess that the whole world of the arts, to me, I've pondered this a lot. Like, how is that useful? What if no one ever buys a painting that I've made? What if no one actually likes them? But I still feel very called on to do that work. And I do think that I'm supposed to do it. I think the Lord wants me to do it, but I don't really necessarily see how it's useful to any. I'm not binding up the wounds of paupers out on the roadway. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that you're refining on it too much. Art is useful.
No, I know it
and
is.
it does
but I
make
just,
a difference.
How does that fit in?
But I think, are you trying to make a difference?
Well, I think as an artist, sometimes you just don't know. I mean, maybe you don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I sometimes feel like as an artist, you're just doing it because you feel that you really should.
Mm.
And if someone said why, you'd be like, I'm not actually sure right now. I might be in 5 years if I look back at what I did.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's rabbit hole.
Okay, right?
Yeah, John.
So it's very interesting how sometimes we're judgmental about the jobs people do,
Mm.
or even the things that we're doing. I believe it was Kennedy, but I may have this wrong, visiting NASA, walking around NASA, encounters the guy who's cleaning the toilets. He says, "What's your job?" And the guy says, "My job is to put a man on the moon."
Mm.
Just think about, it's just worth reflecting on what the ultimate purpose of
Mhm.
your job is. And your painting, well, I haven't seen one of your paintings recently. I'd like to see, show me one later. And I will have an experience from looking at your painting.
Mm.
Well, it's good, bad, or indifferent. There you
Yeah.
are.
That's what I was going to say. What?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But you're also.
But there, your painting will have had a use,
Yeah.
because I will reflect upon it. We went to Giverny recently to look at the bridge over the water lily lake,
Lovely.
and it was an experience. And so art, you never know when that experience will happen.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And the arts are a little bit more ephemeral. But there's the other side of it. At the bottom of all of these chairs are little plastic things.
What?
At the bottom of all chairs to stop them from scraping the floors.
Oh.
Somebody makes those. Okay? I know someone who makes them. That's his job. He's actually reasonably wealthy, making plastic extrusions that nobody thinks about until they fall off their chair and then they curse. And he said, well, how important is this in the grand scheme of things? Well, actually, it's pretty darn important because we need those things. So you have that like super concrete. Does this really add anything to life? So
what are you saying?
But-
My paintings are like little plastic extrusions.
I'm saying, I'm saying we often get caught up in the minutia of what does my job do, and we don't step back. And I really like John's. My job is to put a man on the moon. Because if an artist isn't trying to illuminate the world in some way, then what's the point? And that's a pretty high calling. Ulla, did you still?
say Jenna had a point on the letter.
So I was just tying into both of your points. I suppose
Mm.
the point I would raise, both about the sort of plastic things on the bottom of the chairs, but also art. Well, imagine a world without it. So a world without our little plastic things. How much extra would that add to people's lives when the noise that breaks and the floors getting damaged? But also imagine a room without this beautiful carpeting at all, without the painting on the wall. Or
Or without Giverny.
even if it isn't, it's a cheap
Right.
picture from Tesco, it adds something to our world and brings colour and brings engagement.
Mhm.
So I suppose that's the contrast for me, just what if
Brilliant.
it didn't exist?
Yeah, I used to, when Sunday school used to take place in what became the pastor's office at Colchester Church, we had terrible trouble with the scraping of chairs. And all the Helpman boys and the scraping chairs.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It really, really did ruin a lot of the experience.
Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Point made.
So, yes, I really like that point, Jenna. What would the world be like without it? Yes, it's a Wonderful Life story, right? You know the movie It's a Wonderful Life, Jimmy Stewart. What would your life be like if you weren't there?
Yes.
What would the world be like if you weren't there? And what difference do we make? I think we all make a much more profound difference than we think. Okay? So our occupation is our primary area, and I'll put areas of usefulness, where we spend most of our waking hours, thinking about it. And I do want to specifically say that I think, what Anne said about being a mom, I think that women often say, what do I spend my waking hours thinking about? It's often my family. And so I think that there's a very real way in which women could say, that is my day job, is that thing that I spend, what do I think about when I'm in the shower? Is often people, family, and so just putting that out there, I think that we sometimes have multiple uses, but the Lord's emphasis is on that thing that occupies your day. And if you want to think about it this way, if you spend 8 hours doing a job that you dislike, saying, I hate this, I can't wait to be done, I hate this, I can't wait to be done, you're not serving, right? And then if you have your 1 hour afterwards where you're saying, I'm into this, I'm really doing it, you've still wasted 8 hours by not engaging. And I just want to point this out too. The words that are used, fairly, faithfully, honestly, diligently, sincerely, justly. The Lord does not say, do your job with inspiration and passion. He says, do it fairly, faithfully, because He knows, I think, a lot of times our jobs aren't necessarily things that we are deeply passionate about. They're just jobs that make a difference. Our job is to use our minds and say, how can I make a difference? And some of you are going to get a chance to talk to Sarah this weekend, and you will see, wow, she has a job that she is so deeply passionate about, she practically starts to vibrate when she's talking about it. And you might say, well, why don't I have that? But the Lord doesn't say you're going to get that. He says, do it faithfully. Okay? So when you think about it that way, your work becomes a spiritual practice. And this is said time and again. If we look to the Lord and shun evils as sins, and sincerely, justly, and faithfully perform the work set before us, we become a form of charity. Isn't that interesting? Shun evils as sins and serve, that's spiritual work. So putting new cans on the shelf in the grocery store is part of spiritual work. Cleaning the bathrooms in South Florida is spiritual work.
Or could be.
Could be, right. And painting could be spiritual work, or it could not be. Could be self-absorbed. Okay. So our real job is to find ways to act spiritually in our daily use. Okay? That's the goal that we're headed towards. So it's not about how many items I do, but the quality that I bring to it. Okay? So our job is not the business that we're in. It's about making people's lives better in some way. And I get what you're saying. It's sometimes hard for me to see how I'm making people's lives better. But I think that's a rabbit hole, because when you walk into someone else's house, you notice the art, and you know it makes a difference.
Or even parenting when it doesn't seem like it's going
exactly.
well.
Exactly.
You don't feel like you're making anyone's life better because your children are angry at you,
Yeah,
etc., etc.
that's right.
The thing, surely it's just being really proud of what you do, regardless of what you do.
Yeah,
It's the same when you retire, because I'm artificially retired.
maybe. Good.
Yes, and I actually very enjoyable.
Mm.
It really is. I try to occupy my time with something that's useful, not just for myself or whatever. All it's done is just taken away that I don't have to be up at 9 and finish by 5.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I still want to be proud of what I actually do
Yeah.
and enjoy what I want to do. So, and I have put tins of things on the shelf. And you can be proud of doing that, especially if you make sure it's absolutely straight on.
Yeah, that's right. And the label is facing forward.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
annoying to me when I have to, like, what is this? And I have to rotate it.
But
So-
you can have a bit of sense of humour, by the way, by turning all of them slightly sideways. But I was proud to do that.
Okay, good for you. Okay.
It made people think. And
What does this
make
say
you-
about you, stupid?
Well, yeah.
Right, okay. So here's a lovely list of words to say, how can I embody some of those in what I do? And maybe as you look at those words, you might say, yeah, I'd like a little bit more mercy. Forget the other ones for now. I'd like a little bit more mercy, or a little bit more of humility. So that's just in case something sparks. You know, if you think about, what do I do? Am I bringing something of the Lord into what I do? And then another side of that is each job has its characteristic challenge. So a judge is going to face very different challenges from a nurse in terms of the things that they need to rise up to do that job in a spiritual way. I'm not going to spend lots of time there. That's just I'm throwing it out in case it sparks something, and then we're going to move on. Yes.
The list of words. How about adding humor?
Okay. We can do that. Yeah, that's great. And turning the can sideways.
Exactly.
Okay.
Don't do
All
one.
of them.
All of them.
All of them.
Those
Yeah.
are statements.
Okay, that's good. No, I do appreciate the humor thing. It's so much fun when someone is willing to interact in their job with humor. As a customer, it's just so much more enjoyable. One of the things that people struggle with is, why is your job so blinking important? It feels like a lot of other things I do are a whole lot more important. And the Lord's pretty clear about this. He says, that job, the thing that you do with most of your time, and if you divide yourself up 3 ways, doesn't really matter. You know, that thing that the stuff that you spend your daytime is what you do continuously, and it becomes part of who you are in a way that you can't avoid that. Even when you're not doing it, it tends to occupy your mind. When you've got something tense at work, it follows you, doesn't it? It's just part of what happens because our affections are tied up in that. And so we tend to come to embody the service that we do daily. And that's why it's so important not to say, I put cans on shelves, but I serve people by putting cans on shelves. Because that's something that you want to embody. I make a difference in people's lives. I make people's lives easier. Yeah, I want to do that. So that daily job is really important, and then we benefit the common good. And this is a phrase that's said about 5 or 6 times about your day job. You benefit the common good. In other words, you're benefiting society. And this goes back to Jenna's comment. If that wasn't there, would the world be less? Yes, it would be. You're benefiting the common good.
It's interesting. My great-grandmother she was a cleaner, and people would say, oh, you clean? And she's like, no, my profession is a cleaner. And it was something I never really understood as a child, but as I've grown up, I've realised it was to do with her pride and the passion she put into it, and the difference she felt she made to the people she went and helped.
Yeah, that's right. We had a maid in South Africa, and she was old school, you know, like the professional class of people that we see more in historic movies now than today. And her job was to take care of his family. It wasn't to clean. and had to throw her out when it was time to leave at times. And at the end of the day, she wasn't ready to leave, and Anne was like, I need my space, it's time for you to go home. But she was doing the job, and the job wasn't done, and she wanted to keep going because her job was to take care of these people. And it was really inspiring to see. Those other three, why aren't they so central? It's really interesting because a lot of people would say it feels like the good deeds that I do are more central. They're not as central because we're going to get to this. A big part of the treatment of good deeds is why it's not central. In other words, there's these chapters in TCR that says, or sections that talk about your day job, talk about good deeds, and the first quarter of it is why good deeds aren't as central to your life as your day job. So the Lord spent a lot of time on, this is not so central because I think He knew all of us are going to think, oh yeah, I just do my day job, it's a necessary evil. But when I go to help out at the homeless shelter, that's what I really do.
Does good deeds mean sort of like the old going and working in a soup kitchen,
Yeah.
feeding the poor, giving money to orphans and that?
Helping the needy in some way, making a difference. I'm not going to read these passages, but a good part of them, these are definitions. By good deeds, we mean secondary actions outside of your job or calling. Sort of part of the definition is that the stuff you do that's not your job. And they're really important, but the Lord spends actually quite a bit of time saying they're not as important as your day job. They're important. They're really important. And then the other two, and I'm just going to whip through these, the duties, we're going to get to those. They come from a lower motivation, and then recreation, it's obvious that that's not central to life, so I don't need to deal with that. But okay, so what about people who don't have a day job, a formal day job? You're retired. Bronwyn doesn't have a day job yet. She has things that she does all day. We're told the same principle applies to all people, both those who have an occupation and those who do not. Okay? Same rules apply, exactly the same. Just like Stuart was saying, how can I make a difference now? I just don't have to be at work at 9. I can do it at 9:45 if, right? Yeah. So children, we're told, they're not being useful yet. They're preparing to be useful. So they're looking to use, even if they don't think they are, their parents think they're looking to use. And that's what so much of parenting is about, right? When Charlotte is misbehaving, partly there's, I don't want my child to embarrass me, this doesn't look good. But at a really fundamental level, there is, I want to raise Charlotte to be a functional human being in society, and this behavior is not going to be good if it continues, so how can I help? And so your parenting is about leading to usefulness, and for the child it twigs at, I don't know, whatever age it twigs at.
Hasn't yet.
No, it's not going to for Charlotte, and I should imagine that for Tylo and Bronwyn it's only partially twigged, and when they're about 25 they'll start to get it. Because I think often when we start our jobs we don't actually think in terms of...
I think I'd question whether they're being useful or not. It's going back to the point about humour.
Hmm.
So anyone here that's worked with young people, the amount of times you have an absolutely dreadful day and then a little one will come out with something that will just have you in creases and it'll cheer up your whole day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they
because
bring
of something that
they bring unbridled joy into my life.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
right,
that is a use.
they do serve uses.
Yeah.
Often on the way to something else.
Yeah.
Don't expect them to be your pension, no, not nowadays.
No.
No. I'm just quoting, that what they do with their day, like just going to school, is not in and of itself useful. It's preparing to be useful, and yet children do a lot of useful things. You're going to hear some of this. How might we change education if usefulness was our goal? Sarah, you don't have any opinions about that, do you?
And I completely silent back here.
Yeah, no, right, exactly.
Enjoying the thoughts come.
Yeah, no, right. Okay, so
Are we going to talk about that more later? Education?
no, Sarah's going to talk about that's part of her research
Yes, I know.
involved usefulness as part of thinking about it. So if you show up tomorrow morning, I'm sure they'll, is that going to come up in your talk?
That's not the main part of this talk.
Okay,
As
great.
some of you saw the thesis, it's really thick. I had to pick a few things.
Okay, great. So it's not going to show up. But at any rate,
Well,
yeah?
I just want to say a quick thing about, I was just reflecting on my own life and thinking, I'm sorry that it seems, looking back, like my focus as an 18, 20, 22-year-old was a little too much on what grades, what marks, what accolades, and I actually think, I don't know how to restructure it, but I do sometimes think that formal education trains us, certainly trained me, to focus on whether I was meeting the mark, getting the gold star, getting, applause, rather than what gives others joy, what gives you joy, what's useful.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you think about it, you're getting good grades would give your parents a lot of joy.
I think so.
Oh, yeah.
That's true. That's true.
But I did think it warped my brain a little bit, because I went into adulthood thinking that was the way you do life, is you arrange it such that you're always getting accolades, and that's not how life works.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I really like about the way education is changing is that they're not just doing maths courses, they're doing personal finance courses. So to help you use money in real life.
Yeah.
And so you can see the connection between addition and subtraction with real life.
That's good.
And they're starting to move towards that, and I think that we could probably do more of that. A lot of homeschoolers, I think, do well with that. Retired people. How many of you feel more busy now than when you had a day job? I've heard several people who say I'm retired, but I feel more busy now than I was before. Retirement obviously isn't the time to just sit back and enjoy ourselves. We are here to make a difference forever, and instead of working for money now, we can choose to serve for the benefit of serving, right? So your night job, it's, you
don't
take...
get paid for it.
Pardon?
I don't get paid.
You don't get paid for it, but it's every bit an obligation as when you were getting paid, right?
Yep.
You're letting people down in a bad way if you don't do it.
Yep.
And so that is...
Jenny gives me a really hard time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly,
But
yeah.
I wouldn't know what to do without him. So.
Yeah, no, but, and that's what makes life, that's what keeps us young. I mean, I'm sure that you all know, when people's last opportunity to be overtly useful ends, in old age, they often start to go down very quickly, because I now no longer have a reason to live. My grandmother, when she couldn't go visit friends, just topped off, tailed off so fast, because that was her last conscious use. I go and help the housebound. Now that was gone, what do I do? And she really struggled. Okay, we've already covered that. Retired people continue, right? So here's just a thought. 60 is the age of wisdom. Wisdom is, in the era of wisdom, the affection starts to come to the fore. And I think one of the opportunities of the retirement age is to focus more on the affections within usefulness. So being more deliberate about not just what I do, but the quality that I bring to it. And I think that having the potential with retirement to be moving a little bit slower, not always, but sometimes means I can take 3 deep breaths before I do that thing and do it with a smile on my face. Become more like little children. Just to go back to your comment about Charlotte. And part of what we can do in old age is appreciate. We can have more humility like children do, and we can just be more open, heartfelt about what we do. My job's not at stake. My livelihood isn't at stake in the way I express myself. I got nothing to lose. I can just be more affectional. And the obvious example of this is the way that grandparents can just appreciate their grandchildren in a way that the parents often don't have time for, right? Really, really important use that grandparents do, and you can see right away it's got that more affectional quality, and it's really deep. I mean,
Aunts and uncles.
aunts and uncles. How many of you have grandparents who were cheerleaders who just appreciated you?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, really makes a difference, doesn't it? So there's a shift, and what about when you become too frail? Eventually we're all going to become too frail to actually do anything that feels like an occupation, a use. In the eyes of the angels, intent is what counts. Okay? So if you would do it if you could.
Yeah, which is what my situation is.
Yeah, if you would do it if you could, that is counted as a deed. And here's a passage. Okay? Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you have a passage for that.
Yeah, okay,
It's
right.
coming up
Right.
You go ahead of you.
Okay, so yes, AR 875, subsection 8. I'll read it since you're interested. A person must still have an impulse to act or will to put faith and charity into practice, and the will or impulse is in itself an act. Okay? Provided it does not fail when the opportunity presents itself. In other words, I want to do it. Oh, no. But if you could, would you do it? And if the opportunity presented, would you do it? I'll tell you a story that I've already told here, but it's the most valuable gift I ever got was from my grandmother. She had dementia. She gave me $1. Like the widow's mites, it was all she had. But she just wanted to serve.
I remember that. I remember her wanting to go and get something for us and going off to her room and then coming shuffling back and saying, I have something for you, and pulling this dollar bill out of her pocket.
That was very sweet.
It was really sweet.
My Auntie Rose, when she got to the care home, which was necessary for her to go, her life was sort of unravelling at home, and she just needed to be in a care home. And she said, and she did feel this, but she did say, at least I'm being of use because the people who are caring for me, that's in a way to put in use. But the other thing I wanted to say was, scans show, don't they, this having impulse, they can tell by scans that, and I think, I might be completely wrong how they could work out that their mind is still active. If a person just thinks about doing something, their body is not able to do that thing anymore. The muscles in that body are sort of still firing a bit.
Right, yeah.
So I think they use that with sports.
They did that,
sports
yeah.
people. How they say, just pretending you're serving the tennis ball, you're actually doing some good.
Yeah.
Without actually doing it.
That showed up a long time ago, actually in World War II. People who were prisoners of war who practiced their golf game while they were in prison, came out of prison, and their game was almost as good as it was 4 years ago or 3 years ago, because they had been practicing mentally.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very real.
But I'm obviously not a wise person, because it is very frustrating when you want to do something, you have the impulse to do it, and you try and you fail.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's about not being wise, John.
No.
I think that's actually about being very wise and just being an imperfect human being.
Well, maybe.
Sometimes you have to accept and that gives you peace. That's the one thing I've learned in the last 6 months, that I have to accept what it is. And if I accept it, it gives me peace and allows me to actually only think about the things that I need to think about, not the things I can't do, but the things I can do.
Yeah. Yep.
And that makes my life easier.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
gives you a better track to run along.
No, you're right. I know, I've started running after quite a long time, and I'm running a couple of minutes a mile slower than I was running 10 years ago. And I've been spending the whole time saying I'm slow, I'm slow, I'm slow, instead of saying I'm running, I'm running, I'm running.
Right.
And it's like, you know, how dumb is that, right? Yeah.
Just wanted to add, we haven't said anything about Mason Hunted, but just working on our regeneration with the Lord can have a tremendous impact on the people around you and
Yeah,
your neighbour
right,
over
yeah.
time and over years. In
Yeah,
all your
right.
encounters, how you choose your uses, and
Yeah.
in your marriage. And
Yeah, right.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not dealing with that one as much. That's, you know, the general focus in the doctrines is we shun evils and do good. And I'm focusing on the doing good, but there's a lot of that is doing the spiritual work and, you know, pulling out the negatives so that the positives can be there. And I totally agree with you. That's a huge, huge thing.
so that when the opportunity presents itself, you are prepared to respond in a particular way,
Right.
with years of engaging with that sort of thing.
Yes, agreed, agreed, agreed. A couple of other things you can do when you get to be too frail. Compassion. You can always express compassion at any time, right? That does not involve having knees that work. Okay, so that's something that can come to the fore a little bit more. Read the Word, because when you read the Word, you serve the angels. And if you can't read the Word, get books on tape and listen to it, because you're serving the angels when you do that. You are doing an active use. That is not a passive use, that is an active use. So even when you become too frail, that's something. And then grace and humility and kindness in being served. You've all tried to help people who are grumpy and resistant. It's not fun, is it? And isn't it so fun when someone is saying, oh, thank you, I really appreciate that. Being willing to graciously accept service is itself a gift. There's a passage about, this is just a great passage. We don't seek external rewards when we're spiritual. Rewards for people who have charity consist in their having the ability to do good, in being allowed to do it, and in the recipient's willing acceptance of it. Okay? That's just so important. Being willing to accept other people's help is a huge, huge gift. And I think that older people often need to go down that path. Okay, so that's all about day jobs, and we spent most of the time on it, because that's fine, because the Lord spends the most time on it. Something like, yeah?
Should people be discriminating about the kind of occupation they choose to take? Is it better to be a bus driver or a casino croupier or a teacher or a Twitter influencer? How should one order one's life in order to be in harmony, if you like, with those statements?
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to know what you think about it.
Yeah, you want to drop a bomb?
No, I just think that whatever is sent to us is sent to us for a reason. So we just have to try to do our best in whatever occupation we have.
When I get phone calls from India saying, I am from BT, and I say to them, does your mother know that you scam people for a living? I mean, you try and make it clear the effect you're having on those around you, because it's just so,
Yeah, right.
It's actually very funny, because I've been looking at new work, because obviously at some point I'm hoping to go back and do something. And the amount of work that's actually like the same thing in India, they come to you and they want, basically it appears to be something that's good, but it doesn't take long before it's twisted into something that's actually quite bad. Whatever. And you look at it and you say, well, I'm so glad I am not that desperate that I need to do this. You know, and I've got some pretty good examples that I've actually kept, because it's the way that it's done. It's lovely, well put together, very professional, but it's basically asking you to lie.
Yeah.
Right? And they pay for you to lie. And that's not something I want to do, of course, obviously. But people do it.
Yeah.
All right? And I'm just very glad personally that I'm not in that situation where I would have to accept something like that, because anything is better than nothing. And the rest of the world, unfortunately, is pretty bad off.
Yeah,
You
but
know?
they're
But it's an
not-
awful thing, and it shouldn't happen.
They're not shunning evils, though.
No. I feel that they must have some choice. There are lots of tech jobs in India that are real, and there really are people who help people with online computer problems who are based in India, not just trying to steal from
people.
It's very
Yeah.
sad.
Just in terms of choosing to be a teacher rather than a bus driver or something like that, teaching's more exalted.
Bus driver gets paid more.
Yeah, bus driver gets paid more. That's right. I know. I spend my life telling young people, you're going to make a better living as a plumber than most other jobs. But as an aside, I think that we really need to reflect on the fact that we need all parts of the human body. The heart has the best representation of all the organs of the body, but if you were just one big heart, it would be a mess, right? You need all of the parts. You need fingernails. You need, hair on your head. As some of us know, if you don't, you have to wear a hat all the time. It's annoying, right? You need all of those, and some people are called on to do those, and that person cleaning the toilets was necessary for people to go to the moon. He wasn't just ancillary, he was necessary for that, and seeing our role in that bigger thing, I think, is the important thing. And yes, Patrick, you may say, for me, working in a casino is not something I can in conscience do. But I've chatted to people who work in casinos. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on and zip through those other three. Good deeds, helping other people who are needy. All love wants what is good for others. Okay? If you don't have some compassion for other people and want to make their lives better outside of your day job, well, you need to ask some questions, okay? So, good deeds, as I've already talked about, are those extra day job things that we do to make a difference. Helping the needy, as we've already talked about, and it's interesting, hospitals and especially churches are mentioned. So, contributing to the church fits in this category too. It's a good deed. It's not required. You could say I'm contributing to a hospital instead of a church, but it's ways that I can make a difference in the world outside of what I do as my ordinary role. Often it's because we're moved by compassion, and there's this passage about these are matters of free choice. But the way we should think about that is, I have a lot of options about lots of ways that I can make a difference in people's lives. Whether or not I do them is not a matter of free choice. Which ones I do to make a difference in the world is. So if you have nothing in your budget that you're contributing to the betterment of the world, I'd like you to think about that. Because I think that we're all well enough off that we should have something in our budget that is contributing to the betterment of the world. If you're never going out of your way to help the needy or whatever, then think about that. But what do you feel called to? Because Ula may say, oh, I'm passionate about helping people with speech disabilities. And I just want them to be able to communicate. And you could just say, absolute blank for me. But I'll tell you what I'm interested in. Okay? So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of which. a lot of teaching about, and I'm not going to go through all the passages, about how helping the poor and needy introduces us to genuine charity, especially for children. So helping someone who's helpless is the way that the children, simple-minded people, tend to learn to make a difference because they can see it. In their 6-year-old state, they can say, that made a difference to that person. They didn't have enough money for food. I gave them some money that Mommy gave me. Now they have money for food. They can see that. And that's the beginning of being useful. And I'm going to skip all the other passages that develop that. Okay? And the question that I ask is, in the general church, we've tended to say, oh, churches shouldn't be involved in those external charitable deeds. We should be focusing on our spiritual service. And I'm thinking, have we missed a boat here?
Mm-hmm.
That we need to spend a little bit more time with saying, wait, this is the gateway to being of service for a lot of people. If we take away the gateway, and then they never get the rest of the way, have we actually stolen something from them?
There's one thing, perhaps you're coming on to it, Eric, that you haven't introduced yet, which is community.
Oh yeah, there's that. No, I'm not coming to it, which is a great, so it's a great word that you're adding.
Well, yeah, so what is our community? Do we look inside for our community, or are we looking outside? Because I think that bottom line of yours is encouraging us to look outside.
That's right, yeah.
To expand what we consider to be the community.
Yeah, I really like that way of phrasing it, John. We are gathered as a church community. What is the purpose of gathering today? I hope that the purpose of gathering is so that when we disperse, we will be able to serve others better. So the only reason, the singular only reason to be here is so that we can go serve other people better. Oh yeah, and then we have this lovely community that we enjoy, but we need to be moving beyond that. That's why the sole purpose is to be useful. It's to be serving outside of self. It has to be always outside of self, outside of a church, outside of your family, outside of each unit that you're in. How do we as a family make a difference to non-family?
By bringing them into this community.
Possibly, yeah.
It's about us embracing our faith so that
Yeah.
we can go off and continue God's work, essentially, in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Interestingly, the thing that the Lord spends the most time with charitable deeds on is doing them discerningly. In other words, how many of you have helped someone and realized, actually, I just enabled them to stay in a dysfunctional pattern, rather than actually doing good? Okay, I'm hoping that every single one of you is saying, yes, I've done that.
Yes.
Okay? Because the Lord says, and I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff, you want to try help the good in someone, not just enable them to keep doing something bad. Okay? But how do you figure that out?
I was just going to say, and who are
You
we
figured-
to judge?
Yeah,
Because
well,
how do we actually know?
Yeah, you figure it out by doing it and then observing and saying, oh look, that didn't have the effect I want. Let me try harder. And then you try it 6 different ways and you say, no, that really, really didn't help. Maybe I'll change course. So that's how we learn to do good deeds discerningly, is by doing and observing. I think that some people in the general church have gotten the idea of, oh, it's really bad to help someone in a way that doesn't further their spiritual life. So I'm not going to do anything until I'm 100% sure that it's going to be useful. And that is not the way the Lord talks about being useful. The Lord says, do it, observe, oops, that one wasn't the right way. I think I'll change now. Okay? So if you didn't have that, oh, I've tried to help, but I actually made it worse, not better, shame on you. If you can say that, good for you, because you were trying to help, and now you're going to learn to do it better. Okay? We should be making a mess. We should be making a mess in retrospect, because nobody does it right to start, and then we figure out how to do it better later. Okay? That's a really big thing. I'm blowing through this because we don't have time, because it's time to be done. Oh,
So much, Eric.
what?
We're enjoying it so much.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Keep going, yeah. Well, it is 11 o'clock.
It is.
Duties, I'm just going to, the duties of charity, things that you do out of obligation. So public obligations, paying your taxes, cheerfully. Cheerfully and willingly, freely and willingly.
That
That's a
didn't
quote,
include cheerfully.
Oh, freely and willingly. Right. Yeah. Now there's another one that says cheerfully. Actually, believe it or not, it's just.
That seems to be asking an awful lot.
It is asking
I
an awful
remember
lot.
my mother telling me I had to do my chore. It was my turn to clean the bathroom, and I was grumping along about it. And she said, "Oh, come on, be cheerful. Stop grumping." And I remember thinking, I didn't say that, but I remember thinking, "Look, I'm doing what you said. That ought to be enough."
Okay. So we have lots of public obligations. I was going to ask what else. Obeying the rules of the road is another example. Domestic obligations. Family members have obligations to each other, right? If Andrew is a grump with Jenna all the time, she has a right to say, "We're married. You actually are obliged to treat me with basic civility."
There we go.
It was like he was in the room.
Yeah. Okay?
Don't worry, Andrew, I've got the same problem.
Okay, management of the home, chores, all kinds of things. We have obligations by virtue of being part of a family. That's a very real thing. We have private obligations. We pay debts, wages, we have lots of things that we do that are just, you have to do them. You're part of society, and the theme is they're imposed or expected outside of others. I can say that to Andrew because every spouse has an obligation for basic charity, right? And if that one happened to hit home, then I'm sure that Jenna, we could come up with an equal and opposite thing that Jenna does that's different, and
I'm
we
quite
could do it
happy
with
to provide it.
What?
I'm quite happy to provide it.
Good. Thank you. Okay, and then we're whizzing through recreation. It is, you are obliged by the Lord to relax. Okay?
I need to do that.
You need to unstring the bow. So how many of you have put off exercise or relaxation because you were too
Can you
busy?
have a t-shirt
Now,
made
wait a
up for
second.
that?
Yeah.
So we can put one on car.
Wait a second, I would have thought exercise would be in the obligation.
No, it's in the recreation
Oh.
category. It's in the
Wow.
unstringing the bow and preparing yourself for future usefulness. Okay.
Next time
So
I'm huffing
well,
and
and
puffing
so,
up the mountain.
but that goes on to, so we need to divert our minds. We need to play. Your unmentioned humor. We need to be playing in our lives. And so I'm going to pick one that, okay. So I like to exercise. But I just told you I can spend a whole bunch of time exercising thinking I'm not running as fast as I could. I wonder when I can actually get up to 10 miles on my run, not 6. I wonder when I'll be able to run a marathon, and I'm taking all the fun out of it. My body's working. It's working so much better than it was 3 weeks ago. Dave, who's run all his life, is injured and can't run right now. Not that but I'm actually able to run. That's wonderful. Okay, recreation is about enjoying. I think that we've turned it into competitive. Or I've got to reach this level, or I'm not as good as X. So what do you do for recreation? I was going to pause, except that time's up. And what would you like to do more of? And then I'm going to stop because it is time. So, but just think about those 4 areas, okay? What's your day job or jobs? is there a way that you could make that a more conscious spiritual practice? I'm going to try to do that with more compassion, with more humility, with more patience. Benefactions. What do I do to make a difference in people's lives? Oh, look, there you go. They're right here. What can I do to really make a difference? Am I doing my duties faithfully? And then are you taking enough time for genuine recreation, stuff that builds up your spirit? When I ask this question to the children, I'm going to be saying, are computer games really recreation? Or are they just avoidance?
Yeah.
Okay?
Shane Thomas and me.
Yeah, well, and me, I can do it. Yeah, yeah. I can play chess with people online, and I'm not really relaxing. Okay, thanks everyone. It is definitely time for tea, and in 25 minutes, if you could show up here, Grant will tell you about something different to do with serving others.
He will.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Erik.